I would like to introduce him to you for a moment here. This is our Congressman, 5th District, Chris Murphy. I was talking to him about our simulation. I hate to use that word because it is real. Mr. Drury back there is going to be receiving our bills any day. We put you guys onto committees, and you specialized on a certain committee. Well, when you're a representative, one of the things you do is you're going to serve on committees. And Representative Murphy is on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he's on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. So just like you, he's serving on committees. The Foreign Affairs Committee gets him involved with things going on in other countries. He was very involved in Iraq, keeping track of what was going on, and Afghanistan as well, probably. Okay? Currently, he's in his 3rd term, so he's been elected 3 times, okay? And I don't know if you all know this or not, but he is running for the United States Senate, which is a huge position. Now, we try and get this, we say this to you over and over again. For democracy to work, this is your man. This is who you speak to. He is your voice on the national level. For the whole United States, everybody, over 300 million people, have a voice in government. This is your voice. This is who you go to. And it's so much easier than in the past because all you have to do is send an email now. And I'm sure Representative Murphy will talk to you about that, the amount of information he gets from his constituents. So anyway, things that he's working on right now, I know I read about that before the holiday. I don't know the outcome of it, but Chris Murphy was also looking to try and get your parents a little bit more money out of your paychecks. You don't often hear that Democrats want to cut taxes all the time, but he's trying to, for the middle class, for your parents, trying to work it so you get a little bit more money, which is a positive thing. And also for unemployment, to try and work on getting a little bit more unemployment, time for unemployment for people that are out of work. And we know that's an issue for our country. Whether or not these things pass, you guys realize that who is in control of the House of Representatives right now? Which political party? Does anybody know? Anyone know for sure? Republicans. So you're looking at the minority party right here, and I'm sure he'll talk to you about that a little bit too, what it's like not being in the majority. So I am honored to introduce our representative for the 5th District, Chris Murphy.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be here in Wolcott. I live just down the road in Cheshire, and I got to represent Wolcott and Cheshire and Southington and Waterbury in the state legislature before I got to Congress. I'm now in Congress in my 3rd term. As was mentioned, I represent now about 41 towns. We've got about 40 minutes here, and frankly, what I'm more interested in doing is hearing from you guys, to hear your questions about what's going on in Washington, issues that you're interested in, questions you might have about the job and what it's like to be a member of Congress and how I make decisions. So I'm going to just say a few things up front, maybe tell you a little bit about why I'm standing here, why I got involved, and then really turn it over to you. So I hope if you haven't thought of questions that you want to ask about issues or about what it's like to do this job, that you think about them over the next 10 or 15 minutes. But I want to talk to you for a few minutes about why I'm standing here today, why I'm a member of Congress, how I got here. Because my story starts back when I was pretty much exactly your age. My story starts when I was 15, 16, 17 years old at Wethersfield High School, which is where my family is from, where I grew up just outside of Hartford. I was a kid that was interested in history and interested in civics. These classes were certainly something that, was more interesting to me than other subjects, but I wasn't a real, I wasn't a politically active kid. I didn't come from a family that had any real history of being involved in politics. There was no real reason why I should have cared about government more than anybody else, but I had a couple experiences when I was in high school that made me start to think about whether or not I wanted to go into this business, whether I wanted to go into public service for a portion of my life. The first experience was with a group of my friends. I had belonged to a kind of environmental club at my high school, and we decided that one of the projects we were going to do was to go down to the Connecticut River where we lived on and do a river cleanup. The Connecticut River at this point, especially where we lived, was just, it was disgusting. There was people leave their garbage down there. People would drop old tires on the riverbank. It was terrible. And so we went down there with maybe 5 or 6 of us, and we had to spend an entire day cleaning up the riverbank. And I remember we spent like about 4 hours just trying to get this one huge tractor tire out of the mud that must have been there for like 30 years. And when we were done, we felt good about ourselves. We'd cleaned up the river, but what we knew was that just a couple months later, it was going to look exactly like it did when we got there that morning. And I started to think to myself, well, I could come down and do this every 2 months, or I could start to pay attention to why this river gets polluted in the first place. I could start to ask questions of my town leaders as to why they don't stop people from chucking their old tractor tires into the river. And I did that. I started to pay attention. I started to pay attention to who was elected to local government. I started to volunteer on the campaigns of people that I thought were strong on the environment. And part of the reason that I got active in politics was through that experience. I cared about my river being clean, and then I realized that instead of cleaning it up over and over again, I should just make sure that my town leaders don't allow that to happen. The other experience happened in Wethersfield High School. You guys can't, you guys have dress code here, right? Can you wear hats? No, all right. So back when I was in high school, you could still wear hats, and so I was going into my senior year of high school, and as most schools now have today, they put a ban on wearing hats, and we thought that was a little bit too over the top, and me and a group of students over the summer before our senior year asked to have a meeting with the principal to talk about why they were doing this. And the principal heard our case, wasn't terribly impressed. We asked if we could go speak to the faculty at their first faculty meeting in September, and we went and spoke to the faculty meeting. A group of us got up there. I think it was the first time that a bunch of students had gone to talk to the full faculty about a policy. And we ended up, in the end, winning a compromise. We ended up winning a compromise whereby hats weren't completely banned from being used in the school, and it was up to each teacher whether or not they wanted to do that. Now, I think over time, pretty much every teacher decided to ban hats. But it felt really good that, we cared about something. Listen, it wasn't changing the world, but to us it was important, and that by raising our voice, we got people to listen. Although we didn't get everything we wanted, we got a lot of what we wanted. And it started to make a lot of the other students at Wethersfield High School think about, whether they could get involved on things that they wanted to get changed. And that was the first time that I had this feeling that if I spoke my mind and I got involved, I could actually get something. I could actually do something for my friends and the people that I cared about. And I started to realize that there was this power. There was this power in speaking my mind. And so I stayed active in issues and in politics. And I just basically volunteered here or there for people that I cared about, and I certainly followed it on the news. And then when I graduated from college, I came back to Connecticut, and I moved to Southington. Now, I didn't know anybody in Southington. I just moved there because a couple of my high school buddies were working in the area, and we got an apartment there. And I was being represented in the state legislature in Hartford by a Republican who had been there for 14 years, who I didn't agree with on a lot of issues. I'm a big proponent of civil rights, and I didn't believe that he really cared as much about that issue as I did. And he kind of had lost a little enthusiasm for the job. And so nobody was going to run against this guy. He was going to go uncontested. And I had some time on my hands. I just graduated college. I didn't have a girlfriend, you know, so I was like, you know, I can go out and run for office. And I raised my hand and I said, listen, if nobody else is going to do this, I'll do it. And the Democrats nominated me, 22 years old, no, I guess 24 years old at that point, new to town, to run for state representative, to represent them in Hartford. And nobody gave me a chance. And here's what I really want to communicate to you this morning, is that here's what I found in the course of my first campaign for office, right? I cared about issues, I had worked in stuff, I had volunteered, I mean, I wasn't totally new to this, but what I found in that first campaign when I was 24 years old is that young people, and listen, I mean, we're not exactly the same generation any longer, but I'm still relatively young to be involved in politics. You guys are clearly young. Here's the dual advantage that I found that young people have when they step up and raise their voice. The only way I could get elected was to go out and start knocking on doors. I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have any family in town. I certainly didn't have any money. So I just started going out and knocking on doors. And in April of the election year, 6 months before the election, I just started knocking on doors. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'd knock 50 doors every night when I got home from work. Every Saturday and every Sunday, I'd knock 100 doors each. And what I found was this, is that one, my opponent, that long-term Republican incumbent, totally took me for granted, totally thought that there was no way that I could win. He just went to sleep. He didn't lift a finger. He didn't do anything the entire campaign. At one point in the campaign, he actually took me out to dinner to like kind of pat my head and tell me that, you know, he thought it was such a great experience for me, that I had no chance to beat him, but he was really excited that I was running. He was clueless as to how hard I was working, and just because I was young and just because I was inexperienced, he thought that he could steamroll me. So the first advantage I found I had was that when you're young and you get involved in something you care about, is that you can sneak up on people, is that people don't work as hard against you because they take you for granted. That's the first advantage. But here's the second advantage. When I started knocking on those doors, people would answer the door, look at me, and listen a little bit more intently because I was young, because they hadn't seen somebody that was 24 running for office. I was unique. And so even though my opposition took me for granted, the people that I was advocating to didn't, because I was exceptional in that I was young. They actually loved the fact that there was a young person out there speaking his mind. And so this incumbent, who thought that he was going to cruise to victory again, ended up losing to me by double digits. I smoked him in the election. And I did it in part because I was young. And if I can communicate one thing to you, you don't need to run for office. You don't need to get as involved as I did. But if you care about something, whether it's at this school or whether it's in your community or whether it's in Washington, D.C., if you raise your voice now or frankly any time over the next 20 years, you are going to have that advantage over anybody else who's speaking. And I hope that you think about that, because I think it's an opportunity, but I also think it's a duty and a responsibility, because you have that ability, but also because of this, and this is the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to you guys. Also because the decisions that are being made right now in government, whether it's here in Wolcott, whether it's in Hartford, or whether it's in Washington, are going to affect you for the rest of your life. There are big decisions being made today that you're going to have to live with. And so the question you have is, do I pay attention now when it really matters? Or do I wait until, you know, I'm older, I got a job, I have kids, when it might be too late? Here's an example. One of the issues I've always worked on is college aid. I went to college. I had some help from my parents, but I had to take out a bunch of student loans. I'm going to be paying back those student loans for a very, very long time, and frankly, I have less of them than most people have. But the fact is that it's getting harder and harder for kids to afford college. It's getting more and more expensive, and the federal government right now is talking about decreasing the amount of college aid that you can get and decreasing the number of loans that you can get, making it a lot harder for you guys to go to college, and even more importantly, making you have to pay back a lot more money on the back end. That decision is being made today. There are college aid programs both in Washington and in Hartford that are being debated. There is no better voice to be raised about that issue than you guys. You're about to have to live with that decision. And some proposals out there in Washington are to cut by 1/3 the amount of money that goes into college grants. You guys, it would be great if you guys were paying attention to that, if you guys were involved in that decision. We're talking about environmental choices in Washington right now that would essentially gut the protections that make sure that you have clean air to breathe, that make sure you have clean water to drink. This movement out there to tell you that global warming isn't happening is bogus. It is happening. And if you don't stop it right now, this world is going to be fundamentally different 30, 40 years from now. The seas are going to rise. The temperature is going to increase. It's going to be harder and harder to essentially run our planet. We need to make decisions today to try to curb the amount of pollution we put in the air so that you guys have a safe planet 30 and 40 years from today. That decision is happening right now. And maybe the most important one is this. You guys hear all this stuff about how much money we borrow in Washington, all right? So guess who has to pay back all that money we borrow? It's all you guys. That money isn't free. We borrow it from a bank, and that loan comes due. Basically what's going to happen is that all of this borrowing that's happening today is going to be on your checkbook. It's going to be on your paycheck when you get older. And if we don't make some better decisions today about how we run government, you're going to have to pay for all the mistakes that we're making today. So there are so many reasons for you guys to care about what's going on today. And I don't care exactly how you get involved. I just hope that you give a little bit of thought to doing it. And I think that hopefully you've been inspired by what you've been doing here. I love the idea of having it's not a simulation, right? It's real. You guys have been debating school policy. When I heard about it, I thought that it was like a mock legislature in which you were debating stuff that was going on in Washington. I think it's awesome that what you're actually talking about is school policy that's happening here in Wolcott. And hopefully you've gotten a taste of what you can do if you get involved and if you pay attention. I've loved every minute of this job. It's the greatest job in the world. I get to pick up the newspaper in the morning and complain about something that happened in the world, and I get to go to work the next day or later that day in Washington to try to fix it. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't know if I'll do it for the rest of my life, but at least for this moment right now, I think I'm doing one of the most important things that I can do with my life, and I'm doing it, frankly, at a younger age than most people would have expected, because I found that twin power of sneaking up on people and speaking out in a way that made people pay attention. So listen, I wanted to sort of just let you know how I got here, why I got involved, why I care about this stuff, why you guys should care about what's happening. But I'm very, very interested to hear your questions about specific issues, your questions about other aspects of my job, and to your great civics and social studies staff. To all of you, thank you very much for having me down here today.
Questions are going to work. If you'd like to ask a question, raise your hand, and the congressman will call on you. Rob's going to come around with a microphone. Unfortunately, he couldn't patch the microphone into the speakers, so you have to speak very loudly. He wants you to speak into the microphone anyway because he has it set up to record. He's part of the media club. The media club is making a little documentary about this, so that's why we're having a microphone. The microphone isn't going to project your voice, but it's going to record for the media club so they can do their little project. Okay? So who has questions they would like to ask?
Why did you vote for President Obama's health care?
I'll repeat the question so everybody hears it. The question is, why did I vote for President Obama's health care bill? So about 2 years ago now, Congress passed the health care reform bill. Although it's sort of, there's this label on it called Obamacare, right? It actually wasn't introduced by President Obama. It was introduced by the Congress, and the president certainly supported it, but it wasn't his bill. It was Congress's bill. So here's why I supported it. In this country, we have the worst of both worlds. We have the highest rate of people who don't have insurance. We have about 40 million people that have no insurance. We have about 15% of our population that doesn't get it. And we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world. It's not even close. Our healthcare system is twice as expensive as on a per person basis as the next most expensive healthcare. And we all pay for that because we pay for that healthcare system through your parents' paychecks, but also through our tax money. And so there's no doubt that we had to change the way things are done today. Way too many people that don't have healthcare can't get it. Or don't get it until they get really sick and they show up in the emergency room, and the most expensive healthcare system in the world. The good news is that by finding a way to give healthcare insurance to those people that don't have it, you can reduce the overall cost of the system. Why is that? Because when somebody doesn't have healthcare insurance, that doesn't mean they don't get sick. It means that they just don't get taken care of until they're so sick that they show up to the emergency room with something really expensive. And so if you just make sure that they get to the doctor and they get preventative medicine rather than crisis medicine, then you can effectively lower the cost of healthcare while doing the right thing for people by getting them healthcare. And so to me, well, listen, if I had to write the bill, it would have been different than it was. You're always voting on something that is good but not perfect. What was important to me was finding a way to get more people access to health care while also lowering the cost of the whole healthcare system. And the bill does that. The bill lowers the cost of the healthcare system by about $500 billion over 10 years, and it gets insurance to most of the people who don't have it. And it doesn't do it, as some people would tell you, by setting up some big new government plan. And I think that's the important point to make here, is there's a lot of rhetoric out there about, oh, well, you know, am I going to be forced to go onto this government plan? Am I going to lose my health care? Well, there's, no new government plan in the bill. Basically, the bill would give you a tax credit, would give you a little bit lower taxes in exchange for your agreement to go buy health care from a private company, and it wouldn't force anybody to change their health care. If you like the health care you're on, you can keep it. If you'd like to go get a new health care plan, you can do it. So the bill doesn't really radically change the way that we run our health care system today, but it does by giving those tax credits to people and expanding some existing government programs, get more people insured. None of these things are easy decisions. The health care bill was super controversial, right? A lot of people for it, a lot of people against it. I spent about a year going around and doing a lot of meetings like this with my constituents, spending a lot of time on the phone with doctors and hospital executives and patients trying to figure out what the right thing to do was, and in the end, I thought that it was better to pass the bill than to keep our current system. Go to the back there. I'm gonna make you run a little bit here.
What's your opinion on the Stop Online Piracy Act, and how do you think a day of blackout from companies like Google, Yahoo, and Amazon would affect Congress's position on it?
What's the last part of that question?
How do you think a day of blackout from Google and Yahoo, where they'd shut off their sites for a day, would affect Congress's opinion on it?
That second part's a good question. So the Stop Online Piracy Act is a piece of legislation that would seek to address a real problem out there. There's a real problem out there with piracy, with content on the internet, whether it's movies or music that has the copyrights effectively being violated, and that's against the law. You know, it's pretty amazing how quickly a piece of music or a movie, even before its release date, gets out onto the internet for free. A movie, before its release, can be downloaded millions of times. You guys all know how easy it is to get music for free online, and the consequence of that is that if nobody's paying for it online, then it's really hard to come up with the money to pay the artists in the first place. And so there's a real artistic issue out there that although everybody would love this stuff for free, if no one's paying for it, then there's no way to pay the people to develop the music. And you know, it's pretty amazing if you go and spend some time at record companies today, how few artists they actually invest in right now. It used to be that they'd give artists a really long leash. You know, if Bruce Springsteen was treated like artists are today, he would never be Bruce Springsteen because he didn't hit until his third or fourth album. Today, if you don't hit on your first album, you're gone because there's no money in these record companies to give artists a little bit longer time to develop themselves and develop their talent and their sound. So this is a legitimate argument, and I'm a huge music and a huge movie guy, and so I pay attention to this stuff. I am looking at this Stop Online Piracy Act. I'm worried about it. I'm worried about it because, without getting too much into the weeds on it, I think it gives a little bit too much power to the people who produce the content, the movie studios, for instance, to take websites down, to force the websites to come down off the internet before we've really had a chance to decide whether that content is copyrighted or whether that content has been pirated. And so I'm worried that it maybe goes a little bit too far. But I'm still taking a look at it. What would happen if Google and some of those big search sites and you know, came down off the air? It would screw up government big time, right? Because, you know, government, just like everybody else, relies on those search engines. You know, I get around my district with Google Maps. I search legislation and issues based on some of these search engines. So, yeah, if a lot of these big companies that oppose the SOPA or SOPA or whatever the acronym is came down off the internet for a day, obviously that would screw you guys up, but that would screw government up too. Right, let's see, right there. Third row right here.
How can we fix Social Security?
Question is, how can we fix Social Security? You guys are asking easy questions. So Social Security, for you guys probably know what it is, right? Social Security, basically when you retire. So when you start working, if you haven't started working already, you'll see a little piece of your paycheck every week that gets taken out that goes into Social Security. You will see that for the rest of your life. You will be paying into Social Security, and when you hit 65, 67, you will start to get Social Security paychecks back. It's basically a retirement plan. But here's the deal. Social Security has never been set up so that you get back the money that you pay in. That's how you think about it, right? I'm paying in for 50 years or 40 years, and then I'm going to get that money back. It's never been set up that way. It's always been set up so that the money that is currently going into the pot is paying for people who are currently taking money out of the pot. So if you've got grandparents that are on Social Security today, your money is going effectively out of your paycheck or your parents' paycheck, going into a pot and then taken right back out to pay their claims. So it's always been an in and out kind of deal, not an in, sits there for 40 years and out. Here's the problem. There are way more people that are getting Social Security today than are paying in. So you just have an accounting problem. Not enough people paying into Social Security because there are a lot more people who are retired today than there are out there working. And so that's the problem. Now, how you fix it is relatively simple because there's only two ways to fix it. You either give less money to the people that are retired, or you put more money into the pot from the people that are getting taxed. I would do the second part of it. I think it's really dangerous to give seniors less money because many seniors are living paycheck to paycheck as it is. Right now, there's a cap on how much money you put into Social Security. If you make over $100,000, you pay Social Security taxes only on your income up to $100,000. And so if you're making $100,000, then, or you're making $50,000, you pay taxes on 100% of your income. But if you make $1 million, you only pay taxes on 10% of your income because you don't pay Social Security taxes on anything above $100,000. I would just raise that cap. I would just say, you know, let's go a little bit above $100,000, and if you raise that cap, you could essentially put enough new money into the system that it would cover for that shortfall. That would be my preference. There are some other ideas out there that people are talking about, like cutting the amount of money you get or having to wait until you're 67 or 70 to be eligible for Social Security. I would much rather just say, listen, let's raise that cap on how much of your income gets paid into Social Security. Let's broaden the pool of money that's available, and if you did that, you could fix it. But listen, on the current trajectory, Social Security will be bankrupt by the time that you guys are collecting. So we will essentially have drained all of the money out of the account by the time that you guys are 65. So talking about an issue that has to be solved today so that you guys can take advantage of it. Listen, I know the farthest thing from your mind is, you know, how you're going to pay for yourself when you're 65 years old. But this is a big deal. If this thing goes away and we don't make these changes, then you guys are screwed. Let's go to the front row.
Would you ever run for president? And if you did, what would be the issues you would focus on?
The question is, would I ever run for president? And if I did, what would be the issues I'd focus on? I would not run for president. I'm running for the United States Senate, as was mentioned, so I represent about 1/5 of the state right now. I represent kind of northwest Connecticut. My district goes sort of north and west from here. And that's a big deal. I'm asking to represent the whole state now. I'm going to be one of 100 rather than one of 435. I can't imagine being president of the United States. I can't imagine, A, the stress level that comes with that job, right? The only decisions that get brought into the Oval Office are the really, really hard ones. And two, I just can't imagine living your life in that bubble. I mean, the fact that you can't go out to a restaurant or a grocery store. I mean, I can do all that stuff now. I mean, you know, my face is on TV a lot, especially when campaign time comes around. I mean, I'm doing a lot of ads on the air. But, you know, I'm still relatively anonymous. I mean, I can still, you know, go out and have dinner with my family and not get, you know, bombarded. You can't do that if you're president. So that's really the reason that I wouldn't do it. If I did do it, here's what I'd focus on. And it's no different than what I'm going to focus on in this campaign. So I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. I believe in a lot of things, most of the things that other Democrats believe in. Some things I disagree with. But I do not understand why everything in Washington is so partisan, right? Why everything in Washington, why if it's a Republican idea, then Democrats can't be for it, or if it's a Democratic idea, Republicans can't be for it. I don't understand why we fight so much in Washington, because like back here in Wolcott, like, you know, like your family struggles aren't like Republican struggles or Democratic struggles. Like the fact that you can't, you know, like put food on the table if you're a family in Waterbury, that has nothing to do with the politics of your family. And so why everything in Washington is so political is kind of beyond me, because it's not political back here in Connecticut. So if I got the chance ever to run for president, which I don't want to, but even in this campaign for the U.S. Senate, that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the fact that, yeah, we got to work on these issues like piracy and Social Security, but we also got to like fix the way that Washington works. We got to stop all of the backstabbing and name calling, and we got to find a way to start working together down there. That's a lot of what I would talk about.
Do you think that by 2014 our objectives in the Middle East will be completed?
In the Middle East? Question is, do I think that by 2014 our objectives in the Middle East will be completed? I think you're probably referring mostly to Afghanistan, right? So I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I spend a lot of time working on the issues of now our terminated commitment in Iraq, but also Afghanistan. I've been to Afghanistan about 3 times. I've been to Iraq once. I've spent a bunch of time back here with a lot of Connecticut soldiers that have returned. Here's where I'm coming from on the war. So when I ran for Congress in 2006, I ran as an opponent of the Iraq War. I did not believe that that was a war, and do not today believe that that was a war that was ultimately worth fighting for this nation. I respect every second of the day the people who fought there. I think they did a fantastic job. I think they're heroes, but I think we would have been better off if we had not been in Iraq. I did think that part of the reason that we made a mistake to go into Iraq was that it distracted us from Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a legitimate fight. That's where Osama bin Laden trained, and his men trained before they attacked this country. That's where we should have been, and that's where we should have all of our focus. The problem is we're sitting here over 10 years after we went into Afghanistan, in part because we didn't pay any attention to it up front, because we put all of our focus into Iraq and we didn't have enough guys. We didn't have enough troops, and we didn't have enough focus and money in Afghanistan. I believe that 10 years is long enough. I now believe we have to bring our troops home from Afghanistan. I think that we've done some good there, but we have to admit that ultimately the future of that country is going to be wrapped up in the decisions of its political leadership, and it's also costing us way too much money. The war in Afghanistan today is costing us $2 billion a week. $2 billion a week. It's just money that we don't have to spend. And so your question is, do I think that we're going to hit our objectives by 2014? I don't know that we are. I don't know that we are. Part of the reason why I want to get out of there before 2014 is that I'm not convinced that we have enough people there, even today, to do what we think we want to do, which is bring total political stability to that nation. That may be outside of our control. We may need some more help from the Afghans to do that. So, but I will say, the one thing that I'm blown away by is how amazing our military is. I mean, I've been over there a bunch of times, and I'm just absolutely crazy about what a great job they do there. We got time for a couple more.
What is the best way to solve America's problem with illegal immigration?
Illegal immigration. So do everything. That's my solution to illegal immigration. Don't focus on one thing. We got to get tougher on the border. I went down to El Paso, spent some time on that border. It's crazy. You go right outside of one of the main thoroughfares legally between the United States and Mexico, and there's no fence, just a couple miles outside of the border. We can do more along that border with people and with technology and fencing. You can get tougher on companies here that violate the law. No reason why companies shouldn't be called to task for hiring somebody who's here without documentation. You can fix the existing immigration system. The number one problem that comes to my office is families that are trying to get their loved one or their family member into this country legally. It sometimes takes a decade to do it the right way, which is why some people end up doing it the wrong way. Make it easier to abide by the law, and less people will break it. And then I just think you got to be honest about all the people that are here illegally. I mean, there are people that have been here for 20 years. Well, this country kind of looked the other way and pretended that they didn't exist. They had kids. I just don't think that it's right to send everybody back, and I also just don't think it's logistically possible. And so I do favor what a lot of Republicans and Democrats favor, which is a pathway to citizenship for a certain portion of people who have been here for a long time, who have played by the rules, who potentially have family members here, that they should be able to apply to stay here. I'm not saying that that's, that is perfectly ethically right in that they did violate the law, but I think we just got to be reasonable about the situation that some people are in, having been here for a very long time. Come back down to the front here.
Okay, I have a few questions. First, since I know the entire healthcare bill is extremely long and so many pages, did you read the entire bill to make a opinion that you support it? And then question two is, where in the Constitution does it say that every American is required to have health care?
Two questions, and we'll end on this one. And the first really good one. But I'll tell you how we can deal with the other questions. First one is, did I read the health care bill? Good question. And where in the Constitution does it say that you can pass health care, the bill as it was? Yeah, I did read the bill. I sat on the committee that wrote the bill, so I read it in a number of different iterations. And you know what? If there's any congressman out there who says that they didn't read the health care bill, or they didn't read front to back any other major piece of legislation that Congress is voting on, well, they're not doing their job. And yeah, bills are long, right? Our statute books are this high. And so if you want to write a piece of legislation that amends statutes that are this high, the bill's going to be about that thick. but that's just how you write legislation. That's how you amend the code today. And so, you know, you can't be scared of a piece of legislation just because it's big. You know, the last Harry Potter book was like 800 pages, you know. I mean, a bill that's 800 pages you should be able to read. In the Constitution, there is a provision called the Interstate Commerce Clause that allows for the Congress to regulate commerce that crosses interstate lines. It has always been interpreted that that clause gives Congress the ability to regulate health care. That's why we have programs like Medicare and Medicaid. That's why we've been involved in health care for generations. And I believe, though I certainly know there are others who disagree, I believe that it would be a radical rewrite of our constitutional history to say that all of a sudden Congress can't be in the business of regulating health care. So there's a million other questions here, and we got a minute before the bell rings. So it's right that I am an email away. Whether or not you can vote for me has nothing to do with whether or not you have a right to tell me what's on your mind or to ask me a question. If you write me an email, if you send me a letter, I will get back to every single person. I'm going to listen to you just as much as I'm going to listen to your parents or I'm going to listen to anybody who may be old enough to vote. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.